Hey everybody, so today we're going to go over how to create a very simple C2 infrastructure. It's just going to use two machines. They're both going to be on a private network. One of them is going to be your C2 and the other one's going to be your Nginx server, which is going to host a fake website. It's going to be accessible to the public over the internet, and once it's given a certain path, it's going to redirect traffic onto your C2. This is a very basic and simple way to set up a C2 infrastructure, but it'll give you some good foundations and it's beginner friendly, so that from here you can build up and create a lot more complex infrastructures. You can set it up in any cloud service. I'll be using Azure, but you could also use AWS or whatever you like. You just need two machines and then also a domain which will be tying to your Nginx server. Also created a little repo on GitHub that I'll link below, and it has a couple files on here. The README is going to be the instructions that have step-by-step along with the commands that we'll be using. It also has the default file, which we'll be using for the redirection, and then also in the index.html, which is just going to have a very basic and simple website that you'll be able to host on there. Here I have a diagram as well to help you visualize what's going to be going on. So we'll have our victim machine that's going to be executing the payload. It's going to route traffic over HTTPS into this private network over here. The Nginx server is going to be publicly exposed, so that's where the traffic's going to come into, and once it's given that secret path that we'll set, it'll redirect traffic onto your C2 and you'll get that callback. So like I mentioned before, you'll just need two VMs, at least one CPU and 2 gigabits of RAM, which is at the bare minimum. If possible, I definitely recommend upping that up to maybe 2 CPUs, at least 4 gigs of RAM, but this will at least get you started. And then also one domain which you'll be tying to your Nginx server, which is very important whenever you're setting up C2. You don't want a victim machine to be doing callouts to an IP address. You would like it to be doing callouts to an actual domain, preferably an H domain that's categorized and all that, but we won't be going over how to do all that for a domain. So first, we'll be creating the two VMs. One I'll just be labeling as reader for Redirect-VM, and then the C2 VM. And like I mentioned before, you could use any cloud service that you would like. I'll be using Azure. Just make sure that you put the same configurations onto those VMs wherever you set it up for. So make sure they're in the same private network, which is very important, or else they won't be able to talk to each other. For the C2, no public access at all. Just make sure to create an SSH key that you could connect between them. And then for the redirect VM, just have these inbound and these outbound. I'll be using 8443 to set up my Nginx website that I'll be hosting. If you wanted something else like 8080, just make the changes throughout all the steps. So let's get started, and this is Azure. I'll go to create virtual machine. All these will kind of just be depending on yours. I have my own subscription and resource groups that's named. If you don't have one, just click new. I'll be doing Redir-VM, and I'll put them in Central US, just personally what I'm choosing because I have some other VMs in the East and I just want to separate them out. Over here, Ubuntu, I'll do 1 CPU and 2 gigs of RAM. Generate a new pair and we'll just name it that. I'll leave this like that for now. I'll ignore the recommendations, click next to networking. Right here is where we'll be doing a lot of the customizations. So you might not have all of this, so I'll just do create new that we can walk through this ourselves. I'll just put it YouTube new. I'll select this, whatever it recommends. You could put whatever if you want to do another one. You could do like 2.0.0/16 or whatever you like. I'll just select this one. I'll put OK. Subnet default, public IP address is okay. Under NIC network security group right here, click advanced. And right here is where we're going to be doing our configurations on which ports we want exposed to the internet. So let's do click new. On the far right, there's a little trash can that you click that to delete it. New YouTube security. Just go to add an inbound rule. This one we're going to set up for SSH, and we're going to put SSH under service. For source, we're going to restrict that to our IP address. So just look up your IP address and put that right there, and we'll select add. Another inbound rule, like I mentioned, we'll do HTTP, add, HTTPS, add, and then our custom port, which in my case I'll be using 8443, and put add. And then for the outbound rules, it's pretty much going to be all of these except for SSH. So just do the same thing, add HTTP, oops, HTTPS, and then that custom port that you like. Great. And then so the HTTP and HTTPS, we're going to be requiring certs for our fake website. So that's what that's for. The 8443, like I mentioned, I'm going to be hosting my website on 8443. You don't have to do that, but I found pretty good success with that. If you want to change the port, totally fine. And then SSH, that we can actually connect to the machine, but only our IP address can connect to that. That we can do all the configurations and everything. Click OK, review and create. Review everything if you'd like. Click create again. And then since we created that new private key, just make sure to download it, and that's what we're going to be using to connect over SSH to it. And I'm going to just save it to my downloads. All right, now that it's getting deployed, we can create our C2. And this one's actually going to be a lot easier because we don't have to do any of the network configs. So I'm just going to do C2 VM. Again, for me, I'm going to do it in central. You could do it wherever you like. Just make sure the region's exactly the same as your previous one. That way you could put them in the same subnet. I'm going to use an existing key pair, which is the one that I just created on the last one. And then no public IP address or no public ports. VM. Go to disk. Ignore the recommendations. I think it's going to tell me to pick a different region or something like that. All right, just go to network. Right here should be showing the one that you just created, YouTube new. If it doesn't show, you might have to wait until your previous VM got created, and then it might be showing. And then also make sure that you're in the same region as the other VM. And right here we can see that 10.4 as the subnet. Public IP will do none. Make sure that it's not exposed at all. And then we can just go to review. All right, and then create that one. And now we can look at our virtual machines. And I can see the two VMs got created. One of them, of course, is going to have the public IP and the other one doesn't. I do have this third one that's just going to be my victim machine. Since I'm posting this to the internet, I don't want to forget to edit something and then my IP address is being shown on my C2 beacon or whatever. But this is completely optional. You don't have to do this at all. I'll also be using this to do my SSH connections. The last thing that you need to do is just make a DNS entry, an A record that's tying your domain name that you have to this public IP address of your redirect VM. And again, that'll be so that way you can set it up with the domain instead of having it set up with an IP address, which is very frowned upon and is an indicator. So once you set that up, we can go and start configuring the VMs. First, we'll start up with the redirect VM. So let's go do that. I have all the instructions again on that GitHub. So let's make an SSH connection. -i is going to be the file that we will be using for our SSH key. Just point it to your .pim file. I used Azure user, which was default, and then the IP address. Since it's my first time, it asked me if I'm sure. Just type yes, and then we make the connection. We can see the name right here, so just make sure to keep an eye on this once we're moving between VMs, just so you know which ones you're configuring. And first, I'll just do a quick app update, and I'll have that run. And then next, we're going to install the tools Nginx, Certbot, and the NetTools. Nginx, of course, would be what's going to be hosting our website. Certbot's going to be what we use to get our SSL certs that we can tie to HTTPS. And the NetTools is just so we can use stuff like ifconfig. Just a handy thing to have. Just clear that out. -y is just so that way it doesn't prompt me for yes to confirm. All right, that'll take about a minute or so to complete. All right, then we're just going to stop Nginx because that's running, and you'll have some issues whenever you get into certs because it's going to say the port's being used. And then we'll grab the SSL certs. Right here, you're going to put your domain. Mine, in my case, is going to be myfileshare.com. And if you want to check real quick just to make sure that your DNS entries are set up properly, just do a NS lookup and put that domain name that you have. And it should be showing the IP address of your public IP for your redirect VM. So if it does, it's good to go, and you can click enter. We'll put 1 and then yes, that we read the terms, and it'll start requesting it. So again, if you get any errors right here, it's most likely because your DNS is not set up to point to your VM, or that you have Nginx running and it says something along the lines of like port 80 is being used or something like that. It shows that the cert successfully saved. This is the default location, and now we can set up the redirection. So let's go over to this directory over here, and that's where our configuration is going to be. There should be a file called default. You could cut that out just to take a look. But basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to have it listen on 443, and then we're going to have a location set with a specific path, and once that path is given, we'll redirect it to our C2 server. So to do these changes, if you look at the files, they're all controlled by root. Just to make my life a little bit easier, I'm going to sudo into root to make these changes. If not, you'll get permission denied when you start editing them. First thing I'll do is I'm going to make a copy of the default one, and I'll just name it old, and then I'll clear out the default one, the default file, that way I can start making changes. And I'll be using Vim, it's my favorite editor. I click I to edit, and then I'm just going to copy over the default file that's in the GitHub repo. So just paste it there. I'm going to save that by pressing escape, :WQ for right quit. Now if we look at this default one, it's going to be listening on 8443. We do have these that we're going to change right now, and then the secret path will change right after. We'll also put the C2 IP address that it'll be forwarded to. So a quick way to change all of these sub.domain.com is using sed. It's built into Linux distros. So I have that instruction in my GitHub repo. I'll just paste that over here. Just change your .domain to your actual domain. Pretty much what the command does, I implements the changes into the file. .s searches for this string, and then it'll replace it with this one. The G does it for all matches, and then we pass it the file. Now if I cat default, then we'll see that my domain is replaced in all those entries. And the next thing we need to do is just set the secret path. So I'm going to go back into that default file. Alright, now we changed the secret path right here, and this is going to be the path that once it's provided, it'll redirect traffic. So right here, just make sure the slash is still there, and then just randomly just start typing keys on your keyboard. Make something very random that's unguessable, long, can't be brute forced or whatever. And then for the C2 IP address, we're going to put the private IP address of your C2 server that's in that private network. If you don't know it, I'll post a quick screenshot, but it's pretty easy to find. And once you have that, just put it there and then right quit. And you could look at the file, just make sure your changes are there, where your custom domains, your secret path, and then the IP address of your C2 server. Alright, now we're going to set up our fake website. So just go to var.html. I'm going to hop over to root user, and I'm going to move index to index old, and then I'm going to copy over the default.html that I have in my GitHub repo. I'm going to create an index.html and just paste that there. Now all this is just filler text, so you can change it to whatever you like. And then I'm just going to do systemctl start nginx, and we can test out the web page to make sure that it's all up and running by just heading over https, and I forgot mine's on 8443. And then here is the fake website that I have, just to throw something up there. Of course, you can make this a lot more elaborate, a lot more custom, make it feel more like a website. But for now, this is just something to throw up there. And the last thing we're going to do is actually start moving the SSH keys over. That way we can make the connection to the C2 server. And then on the C2 server, which we'll do next, is a reverse SSH connection. So transfer the SSH key over there. So I'm just open up another window, and where I have, this is on my host. So where I have this SSH key, I'm just going to transfer it over first to my Redir-VM. I have the command in my GitHub repo. it's the one with SEP, and just change all these to match your file names and all that. So pretty much what this does is it copies over SSH. We'll do -I to provide it the key that we'll be using to perform the authentication. We're actually going to pass the same key, so this is going to be the file or source, and this is going to be the destination. So it's going to be our redirect IP, the user and IP address, and then the location. So we're just going to put it right there into the .ssh of Azure user, and press enter. It'll copy it over, so you get the 100%. And now I'm going to back out of the sudo user, and I'm going to list my SSH, and I see the file right there. And now I'm going to copy this file over onto the C2 server. So first thing I need to do is I'm going to put the proper permissions, so chmod 400, and then I'm going to copy it over. So I'll do the same SEP command. This time I don't have to do the -I since it's already in my .ssh, so it'll automatically use that one. Then I'm going to copy that over onto my C2 server, so just match it to whatever your C2 is. Put the semicolon, the slash, and then I'm just going to copy this and put it in the same spot. Put yes since it's the first connection, and I misspelled my user, like always, and there we go. So it should copy it over, and then now we can move on to setting up the C2 VM, which should be pretty quick. All right, so now we're going to set up the C2 VM, and since this VM doesn't have public access, the one hurdle is getting tools onto this machine. And to do that, to get over the hurdle, we're going to create a reverse SSH connection, which is why we transferred over those SSH keys, that we can make the connection between the two in reverse. And we'll tunnel the traffic through, so it's kind of look like this actually. We have our C2, we're going to be tunneling the request through the Nginx redirector or the Nginx server out to the internet to go get the setup instructions or files or whatever, in this case sliver, and then it's going to redirect back and then go into our C2. Once we're done with the configuration and installing tools, we'll just cancel this out. All right, so on the redirect VM, first let's get our private IP address. So this one's 10.4.0.4, and then I'm going to make the SSH connection onto my C2 server. And now copying that SSH-D commands from the GitHub repo, I'm just going to change these around to match my redirect VM. So again, right here, I'm on my C2 VM, and I'm going to put Azure user and then the private IP of my redirect VM. I'll put yes, it's the first time making the connection, and then it'll just hang. And then on this other terminal, I'm just going to make the connections to get back onto my C2 and then download the tools and everything, since this terminal over here is going to be hanging until I cancel it. So make the initial connection to my redirect VM, and then I'll make another connection to my C2 VM. And then the first thing I'm actually going to do is I'm just going to test this reverse SSH connection. So I'm going to curl ifconfig.io, which will return your IP address. So I'm going to use SOCKS5, give it my localhost and the default port of SOCKS5, and press enter. And this should be your IP address of your redirect VM, because your C2 VM doesn't have a public IP address, so this should be matching your redirect VM. And if it does, then you know that the reverse port forwarding is working. All right, before I do the sliver install, I'm just going to do a sudo app update. And once that's installed, now I can run the sliver installation. If you don't do that sudo app update and add upgrade, whenever you run this, you'll get some errors related to some app packages not installed, like G++, I believe, or something like that. So if you get that error, just run the app update and app upgrade, and then run this curl command to install sliver. And it'll just take a few minutes to run, and then after that, we could go into configuring the C2 itself. All right, so now we'll go into configuring our C2. Since this video isn't about bypassing EDR, we won't be customizing our payload or doing anything fancy. This video is just strictly setting up the C2 infrastructure, so we need to just test it out and make sure that everything's working, the redirection is working and all that. So first we'll just start up sliver under sudo, because we'll be going over HTTPS, which you'll need sudo privileges for that. and then we'll just generate a beacon, start the listener, transfer over the payload, and then execute it. So let's go back over to our C2 server, and I'm going to change users. First, actually, let me cancel this out. We don't need this reverse SSH connection, and let's switch users. We'll do a screen session. This is a good habit just in case you lose your connection. You could just hop right back into your Sliver server and also, or your Sliver session, and then also you usually have this running like overnight, so you'll just want to have this in case you need to come back to it. And we'll just start up Sliver, and the first thing we'll do is we'll just generate our beacon. So I have the command already saved in the GitHub repo. Just change these to yours. We'll be using the HTTP. That flag will also use HTTPS. It's just kind of the way that Sliver has it, so don't be too concerned. There's not a flag that specifically says HTTPS. If you have your listener for HTTPS, it'll just change it to that. Right here, the slash, we'll use the path that we have, that we set in that default file. So if I look right here, it's just going to be this one. I'm just going to copy that over. Save. So your beacon, that's going to be what your payload's going to be called. I'm just going to have it to your beacon.exe. All right, and that takes a couple of minutes to finish. And if you want to look at some more options for generating your beacon, just go to Help Generate, and it'll give you all the different kinds of flags that you can be using. If you want to set a certain OS or a certain architecture, you could do all of that. But for this one, since we're not trying to bypass CDR or do anything fancy and just test out the infrastructure, we're going to leave it all default. All right, and the last thing we're going to do is just start up the HTTPS listener. And if we look at jobs, we'll see HTTPS over port 443. So again, this is in a screen session, so it'll stay active. We'll just keep that there. So now we're just going to transfer over that your beacon.exe onto a machine that we can execute it. If you want to host it somewhere, so make it a little bit more realistic, then you could host it on somewhere like AWS. I have a whole video on how to set up a payload hosting on AWS using S3, CloudFront, and AWS's firewall, or WAF. But in this video, I'm just going to double click it and have it run on my host. But to transfer it all over, again, I have the instructions on my GitHub repo. First, we'll just change permissions since it's under root. So first, I'm going to make a connection onto my C2. I'm going to sudo chmod 777 because right now it's owned by root. So I just want to open it up, that way I can make the transfers, or else I'll get permission denied. And then I'm going to SCP this one over to my redirect, and I get to 100. So now it's on my redirect VM, and then I'm just going to copy that over onto this host that I'm on. I'm going to turn off Defender just because it will block it since it's just a default beacon. And under virus and protection, I'm just going to manage setting and just turn all of these off. Just know that Windows has a good job of turning it back on once you restart the VM. So if you do this, you turn off your VM or you log back in, it'll turn this back on, just in case you see that it gets blocked. All right, so on my host, I'm going to use SCP again, kind of go over all this and just put the location of where your beacon is, and then I'm going to just save it onto my desktop. And now I can see that it's right here. I'm going to have this window open just so we can see the connection once I double click it. Just execute the payload, and then we should be getting the beacon callback very shortly. If you still happen to get a little notification, just put allow on device for this one and then start beacon. Alright, so I did finally get my callback. You might have to mess with the Windows Defender, just approving it, making sure this is off to make sure that it gets running. Also make sure that wherever you're testing it from, that it does have port 8443 open. And in order to use this, just click on the ID and then put use followed by the ID. You could do help, that way you get some commands that you want to run. First, we could just do pwd to get the directory that I'm in. It takes a little bit to run. After that, you could do like ps, you can upload files, download files, and do all that with your C2. So this is just a pretty quick and easy way to set up basic C2 infrastructure. And from here, you could build up, make it a lot more elaborate and complex. You could start practicing some bypasses. So first, just try some basic bypass for Windows Defender, and then look into stronger bypasses, because Defender itself is very easy to bypass, but it'll at least give you some good practice on the basics of bypassing something. But just keep in mind that bypassing Defender is not worthy of like a whole DEF CON talk or something like that, but it is something good to start off with. So I'll kind of have these videos set up by the different steps and an attack path. So I already have one that shows how to host payloads in AWS. This one's going to be C2 infrastructure, so I might have some more that'll have more elaborate C2 infrastructures, and then also bypassing. So this one doesn't bypass at all, but creating your beacon to be a lot stealthier. That way you have different videos and ways to customize your attack path and your complete setup. But that covers everything for this video, so thanks for watching.